firstly to Aerospace NZ for putting on. It's awesome to have such high-quality people in the room from near and far, and I must say it's certainly a lot easier to get the far-away people to come here to show off the Spaceplane than it is to bring the Spaceplane around the world. So that's certainly making our life easier. So yeah, the title of this presentation was the not-so-trodden path to reusability. I think a really core thing at Dawn, a core bit of our identity is that we're all pioneers, and the more that we really thought about this idea that, oh, we're really pioneers, why are we so good at pioneering? Actually, why it seems like actually New Zealand companies in general seem to be quite good at pioneering. And we sort of thought more and more about this and kind of realized, well, actually, a country like New Zealand, whether you came here on a waka 400 or 500 years ago, or whether you came here, somewhere in the last 200 years, probably on a steamship, or whether you came here today on a jet aircraft, if you made it this far, like to this part of the world, you're probably a pioneer of some kind. So it seems like we're just naturally all pioneers. Our journey in bringing reusability to aerospace really started with this aircraft here. It was about putting a rocket engine of any kind onto an aircraft and showing that we could use it multiple times a day, and that this was actually nothing impossible about this, that rockets can totally be reusable, that you can put them on aircraft, you can fly them multiple times a day. That was the start of Dawn Aerospace. We raised seed funding back in 2018 on that. I just want to give everyone a quick update of this is where we are today.
4, 3, 2, 1. Back up.
Yeah, that's the Spaceplane that we've built, which is awesome. It's not quite going to space yet, but 25 kilometers, 80,000 feet, flying supersonic. It's really starting to get there. But it's really only it's actually a part of what we've built. That's about a third of the company is working on that today. Actually, 2/3 of the company is working on satellite propulsion. We have 160 thrusters on about 38 spacecraft, 25 different customers that are buying and using that propulsion. And you can look at the TLEs, the actual orbital parameters of these satellites. These satellites are moving around all the time. Like these thrusters are doing real work in space. And to our knowledge, it's the fastest growing chemical propulsion type ever. Not just of green propulsion, not just of like refuelable propulsion or something. It's the fastest growing chemical propulsion type, which we're incredibly proud of. David gave you a little bit of a background on like my beginnings, like where did I start? I was always building stuff in the shed with my dad and with my brothers, from go-karts to trebuchets. I didn't actually have a strong aerospace bent to start with, but my first foray into rocketry and really aerospace started in Delft in the Netherlands, where I didn't actually found the club, but I was a reasonably formative part of the early days of it. And we were all about, it was an extracurricular thing. We wanted to go break some European altitude records, and so we designed this large hybrid rocket to go and do that. Hybrids were sort of very new technology. We were, it needed to be safe and friendly for students to be able to use, also low cost because we didn't have very much money. the university gave us a workshop and an environment to work in, but they didn't give us any budget and they didn't set any goals. So that was sort of like this awesome little microcosm that they created for us to grow and start learning and to really almost start our own business within the university, or like start to get all the key elements of building a business, like learn in that environment. And so, yeah, we built this big rocket. We took it to a Spanish military base and launched it out over the Strait of Gibraltar. Yep, there I am pushing the button on the actual thing. I was the chief pyrotechnician on that, so I was responsible for safety. Here I'm probably saying something stupid, don't worry about it. But it was just a fantastic experience in actually developing really high performance stuff. But it was 5 years of actually building really hard technology, going out and using it for like 2 minutes of fun. All these companies were super stoked on it, but we were challenged by the fact that when we wanted to go commercialize this technology, like we had this awesome team, we knew that we wanted to go start a company. That was really clear. We had this awesome experience in developing technology, but when we went to commercialize it, the tension was, hey, this technology is maybe an iteration better than what exists. Yes, it's hybrid, yes, it's lower cost, yes, it's more accessible, et cetera, but it doesn't really turn the dial like we need it to, because we were staring at this graph. We knew this was coming. This was 2015, 2016 sort of time frame. This graph hadn't really taken off yet, but it was really obvious that it was going to happen because electronics had shrunk down. Satellites were going from these major monolithic single things out in GEO to distributed systems in LEO. That was clearly already happening. But the state of the art, like how reusable is this technology? How able is this technology to be scaled to meet this crazy demand? Because like that we're at 12,000 satellites now. It's probably going well in excess of 100,000 in the not too distant future, and who knows where it actually ends. But if satellites are not refuelable, if the vehicles that get them there are not reusable, how are we actually going to meet this need and then sustain it and make it not just a flash in the pan, but actually an economically sustainable thing? If you look at all vehicle types, space technology is really strange in that it isn't often reused. If you look at the other extremely high performance, also super weight sensitive, really difficult, complex technologies out there like aircraft, aircraft make money in the air. Aircraft get refueled at least 10,000 times in their life. That's just such an incredibly high utility vehicle. And this is actually where my brother, James, came into the picture. He had been working in aviation for 10 years at that point. He had a really clear understanding of how aviation worked at scale, how you could develop technology in New Zealand and bring that to the world through established certification routes. And so it was really the coming together of these two worlds. Like one end of the spectrum of we understood high performance rocket stuff that could go to space, that could be operated on satellites, and my brother understood how do you actually reuse something 10,000 times? How do you certify that? How do you bring it to the world and make it economically viable? So Dawn's whole story is trying to get satellites and rockets to the other end of the spectrum. So we started a company building scalable and sustainable space transportation. And I just want to dive in real quickly, what does scalable mean and what does sustainable mean? Because there's a couple different facets here that are really, really important. Scalable doesn't just mean scalable in terms of like I can make the vehicle bigger or smaller or the propulsion system fit different satellites. It also means, can I roll it out to the rest of the world? Can everybody do this? Is it a way that, is it even a business model that I can export to other countries? And sustainable, there's obviously the environmental element there. I don't think that needs explanation. But most space companies die because they're not economically viable. Like just about every SATCOM before Starlink, and I think like OneWeb is still holding on, has failed because it was not business viable. And there are many, many other SATCOM companies out there that are building up, but they're not profitable yet. So like unit economics there is key to sustainability. And then if we start talking about business risk and even like national security risk, sustainability, sustainment of capability is really important. If you have an asset on orbit, it's much lower risk to maintain that asset than it is to launch a new one every single time. So there's some key risk elements there to sustainability. So there's a couple different theories of how can you actually get to scalable and sustainable. One school of thought is you can just mass produce a whole bunch of stuff with a factory. We don't think that works. We believe, once again, that the airline industry gives us a really clear path to really scalable and sustainable rollout of transportation technologies, and that's reusability. But you dive into reusability, it actually starts with reliability. Rockets in their current state, the best rockets are about 99% reliable, which kind of implies you're never going to reuse it more than 100 times. Like statistically, it's blown up at that point. So you really have to start with reliability. And aircraft typically have about 10,000 times the reliability of rockets, which is crazy. That's 5 orders of magnitude. So we have to start at the technology level thinking about reliability. That means we can get to high reusability. Once we're able to reuse it a lot, we can get to scalable, like we can start doing a lot of it, and that'll give us a lot of statistical insight into what's actually going on. Like, if you've reused a system, you now understand it so much better. If you've reused it 1,000 times, you probably actually understand what are all the different types of failures that you're going to encounter as you're developing this tech, and the technology becomes more reliable again, and this flywheel starts really spinning. So based on that, we had this massive dream of we're going to build a global space transportation system that's going from Earth to space and from space to everywhere else, for lack of a better term. This is billions of dollars of investment. That's not, it's not a starting point for a company. That's crazy. So this is really where we actually started as a company. This is sort of a silly example, but it's a very real example of like, this is how almost dumb and approachable and easy we had to make this technology to actually get to like scalable and sustainable. Like it had to be non-toxic. Like you can't do this with most satellite thrusters because you'll die as soon as you'll get cancer from eating anything off there. But this is non-toxic, very friendly propellants, very safe and reliable that you can actually do this sort of thing. And maybe it's a silly start, but we've gone a long, long way in actually bringing this into reality. We have this technology now on, as I said, over 30 satellites, doing all kinds of different things. They're on low Earth orbit constellations for Earth imaging, for communications. They're out past the moon in deep space. And we're building systems for like lunar relay satellites of all things. Here's another view of just where everything is going. We're producing hundreds of thrusters a year now. This is really, really scaling up quickly. And it's becoming a technology that, once again, scalable. Scalable because every satellite could use this. It might not be optimal for any single one, but it's certainly good enough that anyone could use it, and because we're producing it at a large scale, it's very reliable, which is a key thing they actually care about, and it's very low cost because we're producing a lot of it. But all this is really an iteration, like improving the fuels is an iterative improvement. Maybe it's 20 or 30% better than the status quo. That might not turn the dial for a lot of people, and it's not reusability yet. Reusable comes about when you start talking about refueling in space. So that's a quantum leap. It's similar to a quantum leap of, if you think the other way, if you say, hey, my car is very reusable, what if when you bought a $50,000 car, it had one tank of gas and you could only use it once? How would that change how you drive? How would you think about buying that? If somebody came along and said, hey, I'll sell you a second tank of gas, how much would you pay for that? Probably tens of thousands of dollars. Like the economics on that second tank of gas is crazy. So, bringing like a quantum leap to how we think about in-space transportation comes about when we think about refueling. But there's a real key problem here in that there's this massive chicken and egg problem. There's no fuel stations in space because there's no satellites that can be refueled. You can't just go up there and shoehorn in a refueling port to a satellite because it's just practically impossible for a bunch of physics reasons. So you have to prepare these satellites beforehand. But why would anyone build a refueling port onto a satellite right now when they have no idea what the actual refueling infrastructure is going to look like? So the really less trodden path to refuelability is this path that we've spelled out. Most people try to jump in right at the end, essentially the application of saying, hey, it's really valuable to refuel satellites, so we're going to go do refueling satellites. But it doesn't work if you haven't considered the entire stack. You really have to start at the engine, which is what we did. We started at the thruster. We've then gone to full systems, being able to provide a full system to people. We've now developed the docking and refueling hardware so that we can, when we sell a propulsion system, we can include, essentially for free, that refueling port onto satellites. So we're saying, hey, you don't have to buy a refueling contract now, but we're going to give you the optionality to be refueled in future, essentially for free. And that's how we convince people to start taking this on. So we can seed the market. So in 5 years' time, people start running out of fuel, and we can actually credibly present them with the value proposition of, hey, do you want to launch a new satellite? Or, for a fraction of that cost, do you want to be refueled? That's the unconventional, less trodden path to reusability for satellites. We have a number of customers who are already taking us up on this offer. We're looking at spooling up our satellite refueling program and getting satellites on orbit in the next couple of years. So that takes me to the next one. I never get sick of these videos, so I'll just keep playing them all day. But this is a I just want to talk a little bit about the technology, but then also the regulation and the spaceport infrastructure that leads us to truly scalable and sustainable technologies. This is a great video because it actually shows you the spaceport that we fly out of, which of course is just an airport. The whole point of what we do is we want to be able to turn airports into spaceports. But going back to the technology, of course it has to be absolutely incredibly performant. If you're not going to be incredibly performant, you're not going to go to space. If you talk about these aircraft in terms of aircraft numbers, the performance is just absolutely crazy. Like, this is already the highest climb rate aircraft to take off from a runway of any kind. The only aircraft that are higher climb rate performance are ones that are either like, the X-15 that's dropped from another aircraft, or an aircraft like the space shuttle, which you're like, is it really an aircraft? But we qualify this by saying this is an aircraft because it truly actually has the business model of an aircraft behind it, because it operates like an aircraft. Now, a big part is like it's also certified and regulated as an aircraft, which means you actually certify for not just a specific mission, but you certify for essentially an operating box, which means you can now do a lot of different things within that operating box. So, of course, we can do these really high lofted trajectories up to space, up to above 100 kilometers altitude. That's what we'll be able to do with our next generation aircraft, which will be flying in 2026. That really high lofted trajectory is awesome for doing things like microgravity experimentation, being able to access parts of the atmosphere that we've never really had access to, like above 30 kilometers, which is the limit of what balloons can get to, but below 250 kilometers, which is about as low as satellites can practically fly. But we can also do things like elect to not fly very high and fly just in the upper atmosphere very, very fast. So, we can have long periods of time staying above Mach 3. So this is an exceptional flying wind tunnel, essentially, that will completely change our understanding of high-speed aerodynamics, completely change our ability to go out and test these things and start developing genuinely really, really high-performance vehicles. And then, of course, how do we actually bring this technology to the world? Well, there's actually dozens of spaceports out there that are really desperate for practical ways to go from having a key piece of space infrastructure to having a key space capability. Even though there's all these spaceports, there's only about 2 of them that supply 80% of the world's capacity to space. The other 20% is made up by about 6 spaceports. So the vast majority of these spaceports are more or less theoretical in that they don't have access yet. So our first customer for the aircraft, for our spaceplane, Aurora, is one in the middle of the United States up there. It's Oklahoma Spaceport. But there's a very clear path to repeat this same business model to many other spaceports around the world, and in fact, many other airports, because once again, with a capability like ours, you can turn an airport into a spaceport. Now, I wanted to, in a keynote like this, I think it's a really rare opportunity to go a little bit deeper into how did we actually arrive at innovating like this, why is this the less trodden path, and why do we have conviction in it? Why does it make sense? This is how I kind of build up the picture of reusability versus performance and how we approach that and how we move through time to increase our reusability and performance. So if we have a graph like this with my incredibly non-linear scales on each axis, where we have performance starts at subsonic and goes all the way through to getting to deep space, and reusability starting from totally not reusable at the expendable side to globally deployed. And of course, up here in the top right-hand corner, we have the holy grail. We all want orbital or deep space capability, and we want it to be daily access, globally deployed, of course incredibly cheap, but that's kind of implied. So we have just about every capability, traditional rocket capability down here. We have Vulcan is a great vehicle for getting to deep space. Falcon 9, of course, is really the workhorse, and we've got a number of other rockets, and of course Electron being one of them. And the first one I wanted to put on here that kind of had a really good go at reusability was the space shuttle. Now, of course, the majority of that was really refurbishable in the sense that it came back, it got pulled almost to bits and put back together and could fly, kind of close to monthly. I don't think they ever actually did a turnaround time in less than 30 days, so it's not quite monthly, but it's whatever. Let's call it refurbishable, getting towards monthly reuse. Now, we also have aircraft, traditional aircraft that we all know, that many of you would have traveled here on. They are globally deployed. They are very subsonic. That's fine. 120,000 flights a day happens there. So that is, it takes about 67 minutes for there to be as many commercial aviation flights as there have ever been space flights. So it's just an incredibly, it really should just be miles off the chart here. That level of reusability is just crazy. And then we have SpaceX is really trying to, they are the poster child of trying to bring reusability to spaceflight. Their operating vehicle right now is Falcon 9. They get reuse on the first stage, of course. The second stage is expendable, but they're working on a fully reusable vehicle called Starship, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with. But we do notice already a very interesting trend here, in that as they put more reusability into the vehicle, typically the vehicle becomes actually less performant in terms of its ability to reach higher energy orbits. That reusability is costing them a lot, and it's really a big disincentive. And numerous other companies have cited this as a reason why they don't even start a reusability program. Well, in the case of Electron, they did start it, and then they actually canceled it because it just didn't really make sense. So this is kind of a huge problem for rockets of this type to get over this, it's almost like activation energy. You need this level of conviction to take this hit, to start trying to put reusability into your vehicle. And some notable inclusions here is New Glenn and Neutron are also working on reusability of the same sort of style as SpaceX. And then we have Stoke that's also kind of going straight to the holy grail of full reusability. So then we have a couple of, one in aviation, one clear story of the X1 through the X15, of X1 being the first vehicle to ever fly supersonic, and the X15, the first real hypersonic spaceplane was a vehicle designed to explore hypersonic regime before they built the space shuttle. And then a couple real misfits with Blue Origin's New Shepard and Spaceship Two that are somewhat reusable, somewhat operating, and doing very well, but they're also kind of in the slightly lower performance realm of just being a first stage sort of performance of around 3.5 kilometers per second of delta V. So I'd love to have more axes on here, but I'm just going to overlay it here. Where are the markets? Because this also motivates how we develop technology. All this launch stuff is about 11 billion. Now that's noteworthy. It's not nothing. But if we look at globally deployed aircraft, that's 1.3 trillion conservatively, like not considering all the other flow-on benefits of it. And even the daily or even weekly reuse of sort of into the hypersonic, getting towards first stage performance, even that is about a $10 billion research market globally. So it seems to us that there's a pretty clear path here where we can actually start with an aircraft, we can have the full reusability from day one, we can start to leverage this massive globally deployed commercial market of aircraft. There's so much knowledge, there's so much experience, there's so much capability there, there's so much, from the technology to the regulation to the airports, there's just so much there that we can draw on already. We can start from this highly reusable side, and we can start plowing our way towards that holy grail while maintaining that level of reusability. And while we're doing that, we can also cut straight through this big market of supersonic and hypersonic research. We can build real businesses there. This doesn't have to be a massive chasm that we have to cross as a company. There's many, many more little steps. And the great thing about starting from that side is that we can have that reusability in the end product, but we can also have that reusability while we develop, that allows us to creep up on so many of these really difficult problems that we're going to encounter, like aerothermal heating, like aeroelasticity. Certification, for example, even that's a problem that you want to creep up on. You don't want to just go for your holy grail of certification right from day one. It's much easier if you can certify in steps and build trust with the regulator. Now building, these steps, like the commercial steps are also a huge part of it. We originally envisioned some of our vehicles as being technology demonstrators. We've been blown away by people coming to us saying, hey, we want to actually fly on your vehicle. So we've already signed and flown 4 customers, all US-based customers, 3 universities, and 1 space domain awareness company called Scalability. Space is an incredibly global market, so we're already all over the world, and with our HQ obviously in Christchurch here in New Zealand, but offices, major engineering happening in Delft. We have about 50 odd staff there, and customers all over the world. And I just also wanted to point to why New Zealand. I think there's no more graphically obvious answer than pointing to our geography and just how different it is to be able to run like a really difficult test program, like a flight test program where you want to get to hypersonic speeds, you eventually want to be able to get to orbit. We're going to have to do a lot of flying, a lot of testing. Can we do that in the States? Well, some people are setting up in Florida to be able to do this sort of testing. That bottom views there was just a random day that I picked of airspace and sea space. Like, that's obviously a challenge. If you look at just the turning circle of a Mach 5 aircraft doing a 3G turn, which is a pretty aggressive turn, you'd never want to actually do that with passengers on board. That gives you a turning circle of 162 kilometers, which is twice the width of White Sands Missile Range, like the largest inland test range in the US. So that pretty much implies you have to go offshore. But this graphic is basically why most US hypersonic test programs are either done in a dedicated rocket range, like what Rocket Lab does off the coast of NASA Wallops, or they have to go to Guam or Australia. So we have this huge geographic advantage of having easy access to thousands of miles of test range out over the South Pacific. So that's just a quick view of some of the cool stuff that's not just happening that's happening at Dawn, but I do want to stress there's so much cool stuff happening in the wider aerospace community. It's very humbling to be a part of that and to be able to draw in the international community to Christchurch to show off to the world what we're doing down here. It's really exciting to be a part of, and I'm really excited about the sandbox environment that we're building and just our ability to pioneer these things and bring true reusability to spaceflight. It's really hard stuff, but we're making it happen down here. Thanks.